January 3rd, 2026, U.S. Special Forces entered Venezuela, extracted a sitting president, and flew him to American soil in handcuffs. And if you think this was about politics, ideology, or one man's decisions, you're looking at the wrong map. Because 15 miles, that's all it took. 15 miles between a presidential palace and the ocean. This is forbidden geography. Let me show you something that military planners have known for decades. Caracas to La Guaira port, 15 miles. One highway, one mountain pass, one choke point. Now, compare that to Moscow, 300 miles inland, protected by massive territorial depth. Brasilia, 600 miles from the coast, built in the center specifically to avoid this. Tehran, ringed by mountains, multiple defensive layers. But Caracas, you could launch from a carrier group in the Caribbean, hit the coast, and be at Miraflores Palace before lunch. This isn't theory anymore. It just happened. 73% of Venezuela's population lives within 62 miles of the coastline. When the capital, the people, and the infrastructure are all stacked on the edge of a continent, there's nowhere to hide. Geography doesn't negotiate. 1,600 miles. That's the distance between Miami and Caracas. For context, that's closer than LA to Denver. That's closer than London to Moscow. That's a 3-hour flight. Venezuela isn't across an ocean, it's across a bathtub. The Caribbean isn't a protective barrier, it's a highway with the US Navy on one end and Venezuelan oil on the other. And when you're that close to the largest military in human history, your sovereignty isn't guaranteed by treaties. It's permitted by geography. Until it isn't. 303 billion barrels. Let that number sit with you. Venezuela has more proven oil reserves than Saudi Arabia, Russia, Iraq, the entire United States combined. 1/5 of all oil on Earth sits under Venezuelan soil. But here's the trap. Oil doesn't make you powerful. Oil makes you wanted. And when your oil industry collapses, when production drops 75%, when you can't extract your own wealth, someone else starts doing the math. And Trump recently announced the US will temporarily run Venezuela and send American oil companies to rebuild the infrastructure. The resource didn't protect Venezuela, it marked it. Venezuela has to defend 1,800 miles of Caribbean coastline, completely exposed. 1,400 miles of Colombian jungle border, porous, uncontrollable. 1,000 miles of Brazilian Amazon border, essentially unmonitored. 500 miles of disputed territory with Guyana, active military tension. 4 completely different types of terrain. 4 different threat vectors, simultaneously. That's not a country with borders, that's a country with suggestions. Now layer this on top. The interior is nearly empty. No strategic depth, no fallback position, no secondary capital to retreat to. In military terms, Venezuela is all perimeter and no depth. One breach, and you're at the core, which is exactly what just happened. Here's what nobody's saying about the January 3rd events. This wasn't an invasion. This was a surgical extraction. And it worked because Venezuelan power isn't distributed. It's stacked. One city, one palace, one man. 15 miles from international waters. Compare that to countries with distributed power across multiple cities. Capitals protected by mountain ranges. Leadership that can relocate to interior strongholds. Venezuela had none of that. When United States forces moved in, there was no Plan B location, no geographic escape route, no secondary power center to fall back on. The Venezuelan government was architecturally centralized in the most geographically vulnerable spot possible. This wasn't about military strength. This was about geometric efficiency. So, here's the question that should terrify you. Where else does this exact pattern exist? Which other countries have massive natural resources, capitals within striking distance of major powers, centralized political structures, collapsed infrastructure, no geographic defense? Because Venezuela wasn't an exception, it was a demonstration, a proof of concept. The map just showed us what's possible when geography makes you accessible, resources make you valuable, and proximity makes you convenient. They'll write books about January 3rd, 2026. They'll analyze the politics, the justifications, the international law, the human rights. But none of that explains how. How do you remove a sitting president from a sovereign nation? The answer was always on the map. 15 miles between power and the ocean. 1,600 miles between Venezuela and overwhelming force. 303 billion barrels making it worth the risk. Geography didn't make this inevitable because of destiny. Geography made this inevitable because of distance, or the lack of it. This wasn't a political moment that changed geography. This was geography that changed politics. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more forbidden geography. Because if you're not looking at the map, you're not looking at what happens next.